In Ironcrest County, everyone knew the Blakes. The father, Police Captain Ronald Blake, had worn the badge for 30 years. The son, Kent, wore his father's pride like a shield. That shield shattered the night his ex-girlfriend was found dead. At 19, Kent knew procedure as well as the officers who arrested him. He invoked his rights with perfect fluency, told reporters it was a misunderstanding, and smirked through the headlines that called him a cop's kid in trouble. He claimed he'd snapped, that love and alcohol made him reckless. But one night's footage, recorded by the camera on the cruiser he borrowed, showed something worse: intent. His trial became a spectacle of loyalty and law, father versus son, justice versus blood. When the verdict came, life behind bars, it wasn't the prosecution that delivered the final blow. It was his father's statement. By the time Captain Ronald Blake finished speaking, uniform shimmering under courthouse lights, his son finally looked small. The sound of one legacy ending carried louder than applause, louder than sirens, louder than the sentence itself. The Ironcrest County Courthouse was a limestone building that sat on the town's square, surrounded by live oaks and a parking lot that filled every morning with patrol cars. This was a law enforcement town. The county had 3 police departments, a sheriff's office, and a border patrol station. Everyone knew someone in uniform, and everyone knew the Blakes. Kent Blake sat at the defense table, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. Pressed shirt, silk tie. He was 19, tall, with an athletic build maintained through high school football and gym sessions. His hair was dark, cut short and neat. His jaw was strong, his posture confident. He looked like someone accustomed to walking into rooms and being noticed. Someone who'd grown up knowing doors opened when his last name was spoken. His attorney, Marcus Kane, sat beside him reviewing notes. Kane was 53, expensive, hired by the Blake family with money saved over decades. He wore a 3-piece suit and gold cufflinks, and carried himself with the careful confidence of someone who'd won difficult cases before. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Adrian Kane organized his files with methodical precision. He was 47, lean, with graying temples and eyes that conveyed absolute focus. Beside him sat Detective Sarah Lopez, 39, with 15 years in the department and a reputation for thorough investigation. She'd worked with Captain Blake for over a decade. This case had tested that relationship. The gallery was packed. On the left side sat the victim's family. Rachel Torres had been 20, a college student, home for the summer. Kent's ex-girlfriend. Her parents, Maria and Carlos, sat in the front row, hands clasped together. Behind them, friends, classmates, people who'd loved Rachel. On the right side, members of the police department filled several rows. Officers in uniform, detectives in suits, people who'd known Kent since he was a child. And in the very back, almost hidden, sat Captain Ronald Blake. He was 51, broad-shouldered, with steel grey hair cut military short. He wore his dress uniform, navy blue with gold captain's bars on the collar. His face was carved from stone, expression unreadable. He stared straight ahead and didn't look at his son. Judge Everett Marks entered. Everyone rose. He was 64, with white hair and a face that had seen 3 decades of criminal proceedings. He'd presided over Ironcrest County District Court for 18 years and had a reputation for fairness and gravity. "Be seated," Judge Marks said. His voice was deep and carried authority without volume. We are here for the arraignment of Kent Blake, case number 24-7912. Mr. Blake, please stand. Kent rose slowly, gracefully, like an athlete taking position. He straightened his tie and looked at the judge with an expression of respectful attention. Kane stood beside him. Judge Marks reviewed the charges. Mr. Blake, you are charged with second-degree murder in the death of Rachel Torres on the night of August 3rd. How do you plead? Kent's voice was clear and confident. Not guilty, Your Honor. As he said it, he turned slightly toward the press section. A camera clicked. Kent's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but projected confidence. A reporter in the second row wrote something quickly. Judge Marks's expression didn't change. The plea is entered. Bail is set at $500,000. Trial date is set for September 25th. Counsel, approach. As the attorneys moved forward, Kent sat down and leaned back slightly in his chair. He scanned the gallery, his eyes moving over the crowd with casual assessment. When his gaze reached the back row, where his father sat, he paused. Captain Blake didn't look at him. Kent's jaw tightened briefly, then he turned back around. Outside the courthouse, after the hearing, reporters swarmed. Kane made a brief statement about his client's innocence and the presumption of reasonable doubt. Then Kent stepped forward, ignoring Kane's hand on his arm. "This is a misunderstanding," Kent said, his voice smooth. "Rachel and I had history. We argued that night, but I would never hurt her. My father taught me better than that." A reporter called out, "Do you think your father's position will influence the case?" Kent's smile widened slightly. "You think my dad would let me fry? He taught me right from wrong. He knows I didn't do this." Kane pulled Kent away before he could say more. But the soundbite was already recorded. It would play on the evening news. That evening, Christian Kane met with his team in the district attorney's office. Detective Lopez spread the case file across the conference table. Crime scene photographs, autopsy report, witness statements, digital forensic summary. "Walk me through it," Kane said. Lopez pulled out the timeline. August 3rd, approximately 10:15 post-meridium. Rachel Torres was found in the parking lot behind Riverside Bar. She'd sustained severe blunt force trauma to the head. The medical examiner identified the weapon as consistent with a police baton. The weapon? Not recovered, but the injury pattern is distinctive. Also, witnesses reported seeing Kent arguing with Rachel outside the bar earlier that evening, around 9:30. Kane studied the crime scene photos. Rachel lying on the pavement. Blood pooled around her head. The parking lot empty, except for her car. "Kent's story?" he asked. Lopez pulled out the interview transcript. "He admits being at the bar, admits arguing with Rachel, says she was angry he'd been texting other women, says the argument got heated, but they separated. He claims he left around 9:45 and went home. Says his father can confirm he arrived home by 10. Can he?" Lopez's expression tightened. "Captain Blake initially provided that alibi. Said Kent came home around 10, went straight to his room. But there's a problem with the timeline. Rachel wasn't found until 11. The medical examiner puts time of death between 10 and 10:30. So Kent's alibi only covers the first part of the window." "Correct. And there's more. Department vehicles have GPS tracking. Every cruiser, including the captain's, is monitored. On the night of August 3rd, the captain's cruiser, which was parked in his driveway, was moved." Kane looked up sharply, moved. According to GPS logs, the cruiser left the Blake residence at 9:52 post-meridium and drove 3 blocks from the victim's location. It remained there for approximately 23 minutes, then returned to the Blake residence at 10:31. Who was driving? The logs don't specify, but Captain Blake was at the station during that time, documented on security footage. He didn't leave until 11. So someone else drove his cruiser. Kent has keys. He's been driving his father's vehicles since he was 16. It's been an ongoing issue in the department. Captain Blake filed an internal complaint 6 months ago about unauthorized use, but nothing came of it. Kane leaned back. So Kent took his father's cruiser, drove to or near the crime scene during the murder window, then returned it. That's what the data suggests. What about dash cam footage? Lopez pulled out another file. Every department vehicle has a dash cam system. It records continuously when the vehicle is running and uploads to a secure server at the end of each shift. But here's the interesting part. On the night of August 3rd, someone attempted to delete the dashcam file from the cruiser's local storage. Did they succeed? Locally, yes, but the system has cloud replication. The file was already uploaded to the department server before the deletion attempt. It's recoverable. Kane set his pen down. Have you recovered it? We're in the process. The file is large and the video quality is high definition, but we'll have it within 48 hours. What do you think is on it? Lopez met his eyes. I think it shows Kent Blake using his father's authority to commit murder. The trial began 3 weeks later. The courtroom was more crowded than any case in recent Ironcrest County history. This wasn't just about murder. It was about police family privilege, about whether a captain's son could get away with killing someone because he wore his father's reputation like armor. Kent entered each day wearing a different expensive suit, always perfectly tailored. He walked with his head up, shoulders back, posture that suggested confidence, not guilt. He acknowledged people in the gallery with small nods, as if greeting constituents. When he sat at the defense table, he positioned himself at a slight angle toward the jury, making himself visible, projecting openness. Marcus Kane delivered the opening statement with practiced skill. He painted Kent as a young man dealing with a difficult breakup, someone who'd argued with Rachel but would never hurt her. He talked about Kent's upbringing in a law enforcement family, his understanding of right and wrong, his respect for authority. Kent Blake grew up in the shadow of the badge, Kane said. He knows the law. He respects it. The prosecution wants you to believe he used his father's authority to commit murder. But that's not who Kent is. Yes, he and Rachel argued. Yes, the breakup was difficult. But an argument is not murder. The state's case is built on circumstantial evidence and speculation. We will show you reasonable doubt. Several jurors nodded. Others looked skeptical. Adrian Kane's opening was direct and methodical. He laid out the timeline, the argument at the bar, the missing hours, the GPS data placing the captain's cruiser near the crime scene, the weapon consistent with police equipment, the attempted deletion of evidence. This is not a case about privilege, Kane said. It's about abuse of privilege. Kent Blake didn't just kill Rachel Torres. He used his father's vehicle, his father's equipment, his father's authority to do it. He believed the badge would protect him. He believed being the captain's son made him untouchable. The evidence will show you he was wrong. The first witnesses were Rachel's friends. They testified about the relationship, how Kent had become possessive, controlling, how Rachel had broken up with him 3 times before it finally stuck, how Kent hadn't accepted it.
He kept showing up places she was, Rachel's roommate testified, at the coffee shop where she worked, at the gym.
One time he drove by her parents' house 5 times in an hour. She was scared. Did she report this to police? Kane asked. She tried. She went to the station. But when she said it was Kent Blake, the officer she talked to said maybe she should just talk to him directly. Work it out. He said Kent was a good kid. The courtroom murmured. Several officers in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. The bartender from Riverside testified about the argument on August 3rd. They were outside in the parking lot. Kent was yelling. Rachel was crying, trying to walk away. He kept grabbing her arm, pulling her back. I was about to call it in when they separated. She got in her car. He walked toward the street. What time was this? Kane asked. Around 9:40. I remember because we were closing at 10 and I wanted them gone before then. Did you see where Kent went? No, but about 20 minutes later, I saw police lights flashing in the back lot. I thought maybe someone called in a noise complaint, but when I went to check, the lights were off and the lot was empty. During cross-examination, Kane tried to undermine the testimony. Police lights could have been from any vehicle, couldn't they? I guess, but it seemed weird. The lights were there, then they were gone. The medical examiner, Dr. Kenneth Reese, testified about the cause of death. Severe blunt force trauma to the skull, multiple strikes. The weapon was consistent with an expandable baton, the kind used by law enforcement. Dr. Reese, Kane asked, could this injury have been caused by a fall or accident? No, the pattern is consistent with deliberate, repeated strikes. At least 3 impacts, possibly 4. At the defense table, Kent leaned toward Kane and whispered something. Kane shook his head slightly. Kent sat back, his jaw tight. A forensic digital analyst named Marcus Wu testified about the GPS data and dashcam system. Mr. Wu, Kane began, can you explain how the department's vehicle tracking works? Each cruiser has a GPS unit that logs position every 30 seconds. The data uploads to a central server in real time. It's used for dispatch coordination and accountability. And what did the GPS data show for Captain Blake's cruiser on August 3rd? Wu pulled up a map on the courtroom screen. A red line traced the route. The vehicle left the Blake residence at 9:52 post-meridium, traveled 4.2 miles, and parked 3 blocks from Riverside Bar. It remained stationary for 23 minutes, then returned to the Blake residence, arriving at 10:31. Is there any way to determine who was driving? The system doesn't have driver identification, but the vehicle requires keys to operate. Who has keys to Captain Blake's cruiser? According to department records, Captain Blake and his son, Kent. Thank you. During cross-examination, Kane focused on the lack of direct evidence. Mr. Wu, you can't definitively say Kent Blake was driving, can you? Correct. I can only confirm the vehicle's movement. And GPS data can be unreliable, can't it? In some circumstances, yes, but this data is clean and consistent. That afternoon, Detective Lopez took the stand. She walked the jury through the investigation, the crime scene, the witness interviews, the digital forensics. Each piece of evidence was displayed methodically. Detective Lopez, Kane said. You've worked with Captain Blake for over a decade, correct? Yes. How would you characterize your professional relationship? Respectful. He's a good officer and a fair captain. Was it difficult to investigate his son? Lopez paused, choosing her words carefully. Yes, but my obligation is to the victim and to justice, not to protecting anyone's reputation. When you discovered the GPS data, what did you do? I requested access to the dashcam footage from the vehicle. What happened? I discovered that someone had attempted to delete the file from the cruiser's local storage. Were they successful? Locally, yes, but the system maintains cloud backups. We were able to recover the file from the department server. Have you viewed that footage? Yes. What does it show? Objection, Kane said, standing. Foundation. The video should speak for itself. Your Honor, Kane said, I'm simply establishing that the detective has viewed the evidence. I'll allow it, Judge Marks said. But keep it general, Counselor. Kane nodded. Detective Lopez, generally speaking, does the footage corroborate the GPS data? Yes. It shows the cruiser traveling to the location indicated by GPS during the time frame in question. Does it show who was driving? Yes. Who? Kent Blake. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Kent's expression flickered, just for a moment, before he controlled it. In the back row, Captain Blake closed his eyes. We'll be presenting that footage shortly, Kane said. No further questions. Kane's cross-examination tried to challenge the chain of custody, the reliability of the cloud backup, the possibility of technical error. Lopez answered each question calmly, her credentials and documentation unshakable. That evening, Adrian Kane received a visitor at his office. Captain Ronald Blake stood in the doorway, still in uniform. Mr. Kane, do you have a moment? Kane gestured to a chair. Blake sat down heavily, looking older than his 51 years. I want to resign, Blake said quietly. Before this goes further, I want to step down. Captain, I can't advise you on career decisions. I'm not asking for advice. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. Blake looked at his hands. I filed complaints about Kent using department vehicles. I documented inappropriate behavior. I tried to set boundaries. But I never thought. He stopped. I never thought he'd do something like this. You can't blame yourself for his choices. Can't I? Blake looked up, his eyes red. I taught him that the badge meant something, that it commanded respect. And he used that teaching to hurt someone. He weaponized everything I tried to give him. Kane was quiet for a moment. We're calling you as a witness. Blake nodded slowly. I know. You don't have to testify. You have the right to refuse. No, Blake said firmly. I don't. If I taught my son accountability, I have to live it, even when it costs me everything. The next day, the courtroom was even more crowded. Word had spread that Captain Blake would testify. Officers from 3 counties filled the gallery. The press section was standing room only. Kane stood. Your Honor, the state calls Captain Ronald Blake. The courtroom went still. Blake rose from the back row and walked slowly toward the witness stand. Officers throughout the gallery stood out of respect, an automatic gesture. Blake's face remained impassive as he was sworn in. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Kane began gently. Ronald Blake, Captain, Ironcrest County Police Department, 30 years of service. Captain Blake, Kent Blake is your son?
Yes. This must be difficult for you. It is. I want to be clear. No one is forcing you to testify. You understand you have the right to refuse. I understand. But I'm here because it's the right thing to do. Kane nodded. Captain, did you file internal complaints about your son's unauthorized use of department vehicles? Yes, multiple times over the past 2 years. Can you describe those incidents? Blake pulled out a folder he'd brought with him. Kent would take my cruiser without permission, use it to go to parties, impress friends. I filed formal complaints in January and March of this year. I requested that his access be revoked. What happened? Nothing. He's my son. People in the department thought I was being too harsh. They said, boys will be boys. Blake's voice turned bitter. I should have pushed harder. Captain Blake, where were you on the night of August 3rd? At the station, working late on budget reports. Can anyone verify that? Security footage. Officer Chen was there. I didn't leave until 11. So you were not at home? Correct. Did you give your son permission to use your cruiser that night? No. Does he have keys? Blake's jaw tightened. Yes. I should have taken them back after the last complaint. I didn't. Captain, we're going to play dashcam footage from your cruiser from that night. Are you prepared to view it? Blake looked at Kane, then at the jury, then finally at his son. Kent sat at the defense table, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Yes, Blake said quietly. Kane turned to the judge. Your Honor, the state moves to present Exhibit 47, dashcam footage from Captain Blake's cruiser, August 3rd, 2024. Objection, Kane said, standing. Your Honor, we've had limited time to review this footage. We request a recess to prepare. Mr. Kane, you were provided with the footage 72 hours ago, per discovery rules, Kane said. That's adequate time. Judge Marks reviewed his notes. The discovery was timely. Objection overruled. Proceed. The courtroom lights dimmed. A large screen lit up at the front of the room. The jury leaned forward. In the gallery, people craned their necks to see. The footage began. The timestamp read August 3rd, 2024, 9:52 p.m. The view was from the dashboard of a police cruiser. The interior was dark except for the glow of the instrument panel. Then the driver's door opened and someone climbed in. The dome light illuminated his face for 3 seconds. Kent Blake. He started the engine and pulled out of a driveway. The camera captured his profile as he drove. His expression was hard, focused. He drove for several minutes, the streetlights creating pools of illumination as he passed. Then he pulled over and parked. The GPS timestamp showed the location. 3 blocks from Riverside Bar. Kent sat in the cruiser for a moment. Then he reached up and flipped a switch. The red and blue emergency lights activated. The footage showed the colored lights reflecting off nearby buildings. Kent got out of the cruiser. He walked toward the back parking lot, moving out of the camera's view. The lights continued flashing. Audio picked up the sound of his footsteps, then voices in the distance. Kent's voice, loud, aggressive. Scared yet? Rachel's voice, frightened. Kent, please, just leave me alone. You think you can ignore me? You think you can just walk away? I have every right. You have what I give you. The sound of a struggle, something heavy hitting pavement,
A cry cut short. Then silence. Footsteps returning. Kent climbed back into the cruiser, breathing hard. His face was visible in the dome light. No tears, no horror, just cold satisfaction. He turned off the emergency lights, put the cruiser in drive, and headed back the way he'd come. The timestamp read 10:14 p.m. The footage ended. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then someone sobbed. Maria Torres, Rachel's mother, pressed her face against her husband's shoulder. Several jurors were crying openly. One man in the back row, an officer, got up and walked out. At the defense table, Kent sat frozen. All the confidence, all the swagger, all the careful performance had drained away. His face was white. His hands trembled. He looked at his father on the witness stand. Captain Blake stared back at him. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes were wet. "Dad," Kent whispered. "Dad, please." Blake looked away. Judge Marks banged his gavel once. "Order! The court will take a 15-minute recess." As the jury filed out, several of them looked back at Kent with expressions of complete horror. The gallery began to empty. Kent remained at the defense table, his lawyer whispering urgently to him. He didn't seem to hear. In the back of the courtroom, Captain Blake stood and removed his badge. The gold shield that had been pinned to his chest for 30 years. He walked slowly to the evidence table and set it down carefully, deliberately. Then he walked out of the courtroom without looking back. When court reconvened, the atmosphere had changed. The weight of what everyone had witnessed pressed down on the room like a physical force. Kane resumed his examination of Captain Blake, who had returned to the stand. "Captain Blake, you just witnessed the dashcam footage. Can you identify the driver?" Blake's voice was rough. "My son, Kent Blake." "In your professional opinion, what does that footage show?" "It shows my son using my vehicle, my authority, and departmental equipment to stalk and murder Rachel Torres." "Thank you, Captain. I know this is difficult." No further questions. Kane approached for cross-examination, but his questions were perfunctory. There was nothing to challenge. The footage spoke for itself. As Blake stepped down, he paused near the defense table. Kent looked up at him, eyes desperate. "Dad, I thought you'd fix it," Kent whispered. Blake's voice was barely audible, but carried in the silent courtroom. "You stole my badge the moment you killed in its shadow." Then he walked past and out of the courtroom. Several officers followed him, their heads bowed. The trial concluded quickly after that. Kane put on a brief defense, calling character witnesses, trying to suggest the footage was misleading. But there was nothing to say. The jury had seen everything. Closing arguments were held the next day. Kane did his best, talking about reasonable doubt, about the tragedy of a young life. But his words fell flat. Kane's closing was simple. "You saw the footage. You heard his father. Kent Blake used the authority of his father's badge to commit murder. He believed he was untouchable. The evidence proves he was wrong. Find him guilty." The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Kent Blake, guilty of murder in the first degree." Kent's head dropped. His shoulders shook. In the gallery, Rachel's family held each other and wept. The officers present sat in stunned silence. Sentencing was held 1 week later. Rachel's parents gave victim impact statements. They spoke about their daughter's dreams, her kindness, her fear in the weeks before her death. When they finished, Judge Marks called for any additional statements. Adrian Kane stood. Your Honor, Captain Blake has requested to make a statement. Captain Blake entered from the back of the courtroom. He wore his dress uniform one last time. He walked to the podium and looked at his son, who couldn't meet his eyes. Your Honor, Blake began, his voice steady but heavy. I taught my son that the badge meant something, that it represented duty, service, accountability. I taught him that respect for the law wasn't optional, that power without responsibility was tyranny. He paused. He learned none of it. Or worse, he learned it and chose to pervert it. He used the tools I trusted him with to commit murder. He wore my authority like camouflage. He believed that being my son made him immune to consequence. Blake's voice grew harder. Justice is heavier when it falls close to home. But if we don't let it fall, no one's safe beneath it. My son killed Rachel Torres. He used my vehicle, my equipment, my reputation. And in doing so, he destroyed everything I spent 30 years building. He looked directly at Kent. I resign my position effective immediately. I can't wear this uniform knowing what you did in its shadow. But before I take it off for the last time, I want you to understand something. You didn't just kill Rachel. You killed the trust people placed in this badge. You killed the pride I felt wearing it. You killed every lesson I tried to teach you about honor and duty. Blake's voice broke slightly, but he continued. You're my son. I love you. But I can't protect you from what you've done. And I wouldn't if I could. Because that's what you never understood. Love doesn't mean shielding someone from consequences. It means holding them accountable even when it hurts. He stepped back from the podium. That's all, Your Honor. Kent was crying openly now, his face in his hands. Dad, he said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Blake looked at him once more, then turned and walked out of the courtroom for the last time. The uniform that had defined him for 3 decades would be turned in within the hour. Judge Marks let the silence settle. Then he spoke, looking at Kent with an expression of profound disappointment. Kent Blake, Judge Marks said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. This court has seen many crimes, but few demonstrate such a complete perversion of privilege as yours. You didn't just murder Rachel Torres. You weaponized your father's authority to do it. You used the badge he wore with honor as a tool for intimidation and violence. You believed that being a police captain's son made you untouchable. Judge Marks leaned forward. You wielded authority you did not earn. Every privilege your father worked 30 years to build became your weapon. The dashcam footage shows you activating emergency lights, not to serve the public, but to terrify a young woman before you killed her. You turned the tools of justice into instruments of murder. That is not just criminal. It is a betrayal of every principle your father tried to instill in you. His voice grew harder. Your father taught you accountability. He taught you that power comes with responsibility. He taught you that the badge means something. You learned none of it. Instead, you learned how to manipulate the system, how to use your family name as a shield, how to believe that rules applied to everyone except you. Judge Marks picked up the sentencing document.
The jury has found you guilty of first-degree murder.
The law provides for a sentence of life imprisonment. Given the premeditated nature of this crime, the abuse of police authority, and the complete absence of remorse until you were caught, this court finds that the maximum sentence is not only appropriate, but required. You will spend the remainder of your natural life in prison. You will not have the opportunity to abuse authority again, and you will have decades to learn what your father taught, but you ignored. That respect is earned, that power must be checked, and that no one is above the law. He set the document down. Let his father's integrity, not his influence, define this verdict. Let the record show that Captain Blake stood for justice, even when it meant standing against his own son. That is the mark of true honor.
Something you will spend your life understanding from behind bars.
Judge Marks banged the gavel. Bailiff, remand the defendant. Kent was led away in chains. He walked slowly, his head down, whispering, "Dad, I thought you'd fix it." Over and over, like a broken prayer. Outside the courthouse, press gathered for statements. Captain Blake, no longer in uniform, wearing civilian clothes for the first time in 30 years, stood at the microphone. "Justice is heavier when it falls close to home," he said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "But if we don't let it fall, no one's safe beneath it. My son committed a terrible crime. He used my authority to do it. I take responsibility for not seeing it sooner, for not stopping it. But I will not protect him from the consequences of his choices." He paused. "I've resigned my position. I can't continue to serve knowing what was done in the shadow of my badge. But I hope that my decision to testify, to stand for Rachel Torres, even against my own son, shows that the law is bigger than blood. It has to be, or nothing means anything." He stepped away from the microphone and walked to his car. Reporters called after him, but he didn't respond. He drove away slowly, the man who'd spent his entire adult life in uniform, now just another civilian carrying an impossible weight. The case sparked national attention. Discussions about police family privilege, about nepotism in law enforcement, about the way children of officers sometimes learned to manipulate the system rather than respect it.
Reforms were enacted in small departments across Texas, requiring stricter controls on vehicle access and mandatory accountability training for family members of officers. Kent Blake was transferred to a state prison 200 miles from Ironcrest County. He was processed, assigned a number, placed in general population. Other inmates knew who he was. The cop's kid who killed his girlfriend. Prison, it turned out, had its own justice system, and it was not kind to those who'd abused authority. In his cell at night, Kent replayed his father's words. "You stole my badge the moment you killed in its shadow." He'd thought being Captain Blake's son made him untouchable. He'd thought his father would fix it, would protect him, would use influence to make it all go away. He'd been wrong. Ronald Blake never visited, never wrote, Never spoke his son's name again in public. He took a job as a security consultant, far from law enforcement, trying to rebuild something from the wreckage of his legacy.
The badge he'd set on the evidence table remained there throughout the trial. After sentencing, it was photographed for the official record. The image showed the gold shield resting on dark wood, its reflection split clean down the middle by the grain of the table. One side for duty, one side for blood. Two halves that could never be whole again. That photograph became the defining image of the case. Not the dashcam footage, not Kent being led away in chains, but the badge, split down the middle, representing the choice Captain Blake had made, the choice between protecting his son and protecting the integrity of everything the badge represented. He'd chosen the badge, and it had cost him everything. Years later, a reporter asked Ronald Blake if he regretted testifying against his son. Blake was 60 by then, his hair completely white, his face lined with years of carrying impossible weight. "Every day," he said quietly, "and not at all." The reporter looked confused. Blake explained, "I regret that I had to. I regret that my son made choices that put me in that position. I regret every moment that led to Rachel Torres's death. But do I regret standing up and telling the truth? No. Because if I'd protected him, if I'd used my influence to shield him, then everything I taught him about honor and duty would have been a lie. And Rachel's family would never have had justice." He looked at his hands, the hands that had worn a badge for 30 years. "The hardest thing I ever did was set that badge down on the evidence table. But it was also the rightest thing, because some things are bigger than blood, and justice is one of them." The reporter published the interview. It ran alongside the photograph of the split badge, and people who read it understood, perhaps for the first time, the true cost of choosing duty over family. Kent Blake remained in prison. His appeals were denied. His sentence stood. And in the empty evidence room of the Ironcrest County courthouse, a badge sat in a sealed box, its reflection still split down the middle, a permanent reminder that sometimes the hardest justice is the kind that falls closest to home.